You let her insult me in my own house, and now you want me to keep paying your rent. You know what? Let your perfect mother-in-law pay for it, since she is so flawless." The silence that followed my words was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My son Emmett's fork hung suspended in the air. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, stared at me with her mouth wide open, her bright red dress contrasting sharply with the pale shock that now covered her face. "My name is Alice Fletcher. I am 70 years old, and this was the very night I finally stopped being invisible. If you had asked me a year ago what my life would be like at this age, I would have told you it would be quiet, modest, but highly dignified. A simple existence in my small apartment near the historic downtown of Charleston, where the sweet smell of magnolias perfumes the air and the church bells mark the steady rhythm of my days. For over 3 decades, I have lived right here in this apartment. Every single corner holds a story. The old rocking chair where I spent entire nights watching over Emmett's fevers when he was just a little boy. The closet where I keep the scraps of garments I have sewn for my various clients over the years. The wooden dining table where Michael, my late husband, used to drink his black coffee every morning before leaving for his job as a police officer. The deep wrinkles on my hands tell their own unique story. Years of sewing dresses, altering pants, and mending winter coats for my neighbors, who sometimes paid me with dollars, and other times only with their deep gratitude. As a humble seamstress, I was never rich, but my steady skills allowed me to support my family after Michael passed away in that terrible car accident when Emmett was only 8 years old. On Tuesday mornings, I meet with a group of older women at the local community center. We share hot coffee, stories, and sometimes the heavy worries that only other women our age can truly understand. On Thursdays, I teach basic sewing to immigrant children at a neighborhood outreach program. Their little fingers struggling with the needle remind me of myself, back when my grandma taught me this very trade that would eventually become my livelihood. My retirement pension and a few occasional sewing jobs allow me to live completely without luxuries, but with dignity, or at least, that is exactly how it was until Emmett showed up at my front door that one February day. The bright afternoon sun was shining right through the window, casting long shadows all across the tile floor. I was looking through an old photo album. It is one of those quiet rituals we older folks do just to keep our fading memories alive. One photograph in particular transported me exactly 50 years back in time. A 20-year-old girl in a white cotton dress with red flowers that I had sewn all by myself. Right next to her, Michael in his police uniform, looking so incredibly handsome that it physically hurt to look at him. Right behind us was the New York School of Design, where I had just been accepted with a full academic scholarship. I caressed the glossy photograph with trembling fingers. Absolutely no one, not even Emmett, knew about this hidden part of my history. How I had constantly dreamed of becoming a high-end fashion designer. How I had won that massive scholarship that would open every single door for me. And exactly how I gave it all up when I found out I was pregnant and Michael was stationed down in Charleston. I honestly did not regret it. At least, that is what I always told myself. My quiet life with Michael had been incredibly good. It was full of true love, even if it was cut entirely too short. And Emmett. My sweet Emmett had been the absolute center of my existence since the day he came into this world. I clearly remembered those endless dark nights right after Michael died. The overwhelming, crushing fear of being solely responsible for a young, growing child. How I turned all that deep pain into pure determination. How I turned our small living room into a working sewing shop so I could make money while carefully watching Emmett do his school homework. Someday, you will have a much easier life than mine, son, I would whisper to him while he slept. And I worked tirelessly around the clock to make sure that happened. I paid for his entire college tuition. I made absolutely sure he never lacked a single essential thing. I was so incredibly happy when he got that great job at the travel agency, with a solid salary and a bright future ahead of him. The sudden sound of the doorbell pulled me right out of my memories. I closed the heavy album and put it away in the drawer of the nightstand, right alongside those old dreams that never came true. When I opened the front door, Emmett's face told me absolutely everything I needed to know before he even said a single word. He was completely pale, with deep dark circles under his eyes, and an expression I had not seen since he was a little boy who had just broken something valuable. It was a terrible mix of fear and deep shame. By his side, Chloe held her chin up high, just like she always did. My arrogant daughter-in-law, with her perfectly styled hair and her flawless manicure, looked completely out of place on my modest front porch. She was carrying a designer handbag that cost more than what I spent on groceries in 2 whole months. "Mom." Emmett's voice trembled slightly. "Can we come in? We really need to talk to you." I let them inside and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Chloe barely even touched her mug. She looked around the room with that exact same look of slight disgust I was already so used to. She had grown up on the Upper East Side of New York, the only daughter of a prestigious doctor and a wealthy college professor. From the very first time Emmett brought her home, she made it perfectly clear that she considered living in Charleston a massive step backward in her life. "I lost my job, Mom." Emmett's heavy words dropped like stones into a quiet pond. The pandemic. The massive budget cuts in the tourism sector. They have been laying people off for months. Yesterday, it was finally my turn. Chloe scoffed very softly. I specifically told him to ask for a raise, not to just let himself get fired. Her sharp, cruel comment just hung in the air right between us. "We cannot afford the rent for our luxury apartment," Emmett continued, completely ignoring his wife's jab. "We have blown through all our savings over the past few months. I tried to find another job, but it is absolutely impossible to find anything decent in this backwards town," Chloe quickly interrupted. "I have told him 1,000 times that we should just move back to New York, but he flat out refuses to listen to me." I looked deeply at my son. That sweet little boy I had raised all on my own now turned into a 45-year-old man carrying the crushing weight of total failure on his shoulders. I saw the exact same raw vulnerability in his eyes as when he was 8 years old, waking up crying because he missed his dad. "How much money do you guys need?" I asked. I already knew I was going to crack open my emergency savings account, the one I had built up, dollar by dollar, over so many long years. $2,000 a month, plus $200 for the building management fees, Emmett replied, not even daring to look me directly in the eyes. "Just until I find something highly stable. I absolutely promise you, Mom." Chloe stood up and confidently walked over to the front window. "I know it is a whole lot to ask, Alice. If my parents were not traveling all around South America right now, a total lie. I knew for a fact her parents were sitting right up in New York. Emmett had told me they had a very distant relationship with their daughter ever since she married him. Just a simple, middle-class worker from South Carolina. But I kept my mouth shut. I did not say a word. "I will pay you back every single penny, Mom. I swear it." Emmett looked like he was on the verge of crying. That night, right after they finally left, I opened the heavy lockbox where I kept my life savings. $50,000, saved up penny by penny over the passing years, my vital safety net for my old age. My little insurance policy against medical emergencies or unexpected home repairs. My private fund so that I would never have to be a heavy burden on anyone when I got even older. I took out $2,200 and slipped the cash straight into an envelope. The very next day, I made the first bank transfer directly to Emmett and Chloe's landlord. The days quickly turned into weeks, and those weeks bled right into months. Every single 5th day of the month, $2,200 left my bank account and went straight to their landlord. Each massive transfer felt like a slow hemorrhage draining my life savings. To keep up with that constant payment, I had to deeply cut back on my own expenses across the board. The central heating became an absolute luxury that I only allowed myself to use on the absolute coldest days of winter. My daily meals went down to just rice and eggs, night after night. I completely stopped buying the fancy coffee I loved so much. I stretched out my expensive arthritis medication to save money, until the joint pain would literally keep me wide awake all night long. I kept wearing the exact same worn-out pair of shoes until the rubber soles completely split open. And even then, I just fixed them up with cheap glue and patches. Everything I did was just to keep that constant stream of cash flowing into the luxury apartment my son and his wife were still living in. Right in the heart of downtown, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the entire city. Throughout those tough months, I would see the flashy pictures Chloe posted on Instagram, dinners at incredibly pricey restaurants, a brand new designer dress, an extravagant weekend getaway at a luxury spa resort out in Aspen. Meanwhile, I was sitting at home counting every single penny, actively wondering just how much longer I could keep this whole dire situation afloat. Emmett would call me every now and then. He always came fully loaded with terrible excuses about why he had not found a job yet. The job market is just absolutely impossible right now, Mom. But I do have a big interview set up for next week. I am really thinking about a total career change. I pretended to completely believe him. It was so much easier than facing the harsh truth, the brutal reality that my own son, the boy I had sacrificed absolutely everything for, was just blatantly using me. One afternoon in June, while I was carefully sewing a hem for my neighbor from apartment number 4, I got a phone call from Monica. She was an old co-worker of Emmett's. "Alice, I am so incredibly sorry to bother you." Her voice sounded really concerned, "but I think there is something you really ought to know. I was at the luxury mall yesterday, and I actually saw Chloe over in the fine jewelry section. She was buying an incredibly expensive bracelet. When I politely asked her how they were holding up after Emmett got laid off, she got super nervous and told me she was in a huge rush. My sewing needle stopped right in the middle of the fabric. What really worries me," Monica continued, "is that I actually overheard her talking on her cell phone right before she even noticed me standing there. She was saying something about the money her parents send her every single month. She talked about how she is secretly saving it all up for whenever she finally gets completely sick of living in Charleston. Alice, I honestly do not think they are doing nearly as bad as Emmett has led you to believe." I could not sleep a single wink that night. Monica's words kept echoing inside my head over and over again. Was it really possible that Chloe had piles of cash from her wealthy parents and she simply was not using it to pay their massive rent? Did Emmett know anything at all about this? The following day, I did something I honestly never thought I would actually do. I took the city bus all the way downtown, and I just waited outside the luxury apartment building where my son lived. Right at 11 in the morning, I saw Chloe walking out with her good friend Brooke. I followed them from a very safe distance until they walked right into a trendy coffee shop. I sat down at a nearby table, hiding myself behind a large decorative plant. My heart was beating so fast and so loud that I was terrified they might actually hear it. "I just cannot believe your mother-in-law is actually paying your rent," I heard Brooke say between sips of her fancy coffee. "And Emmett still has not found a job yet?" Chloe laughed out loud. It was this crystal clear, ice-cold sound. "Emmett is way too proud to accept any of the basic jobs they offer him. He says they are completely beneath his level of expertise." She took a brief pause to take a bite out of her sweet pastry. "Besides, why should he rush things? His mom is just going to keep paying all the bills while he searches for the absolute perfect job." "But do your parents not help you guys out too?" Brooke asked her. Chloe lowered her voice, but I could still hear her loud and clear. "My parents wire me $2,000 every single month, but Emmett does not know a thing about it. I am saving it all up so I can move back to New York if things do not get better down here. There is absolutely no way I am getting trapped in Charleston for the rest of my life." I felt like I could not breathe, like all the air had been violently sucked out of the room. My hands were shaking so violently that I had to grab onto the edge of the table just to keep from falling over when I finally stood up. I paid for my untouched coffee and walked out onto the street, feeling like the entire world was crumbling right beneath my feet. My own son was allowing me to completely drain my life savings, all while his arrogant wife was secretly hoarding away piles of cash. The deep pain of that betrayal was so sharp that I was practically doubled over in pure agony as I walked all the way back to the bus stop. That evening, sitting alone in my dark apartment, I checked my bank account balance. $35,000. $15,000 entirely gone in just 6 short months. At this terrible rate, in less than 3 years, I would have absolutely nothing left to my name. I made a firm decision right then and there. I was not going to confront Emmett and Chloe immediately. I needed way more information. I needed a solid plan. And above all else, I deeply needed to toughen up my heart for what was inevitably going to happen next. July arrived with a brutal heat wave that wrapped around the city like a heavy, suffocating blanket. The busy streets would completely empty out by the afternoon as folks desperately searched for shelter from the relentless sun. Inside my tiny apartment, my old box fan buzzed away tirelessly. It just pushed the hot air back and forth without offering any real relief at all. I decided to host a big family dinner. Just to celebrate the fact that you will be finding a great job very soon, I told Emmett over the telephone. I had to painfully swallow back the bitter taste that threatened to ruin my words. I spent the entire day preparing a big pot roast. It had been Emmett's absolute favorite meal since he was just a little boy. The savory smell of roasted meat and fresh herbs completely filled the kitchen, while my hands worked with the kind of smooth precision that only comes from decades of hard practice. I also made a fresh pitcher of sweet tea and baked an apple pie for dessert. I laid out the hand-embroidered tablecloth that used to belong to my own mother. I brought out the fine china, the good plates that I normally only ever used on Christmas and very special occasions. I polished the crystal glasses until they practically sparkled right under the dining room light. I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect for what was about to happen. Emmett and Chloe arrived right at 8 o'clock in the evening. My son brought me a colorful bouquet of carnations. They are my favorite flowers. It was a gesture that truly would have touched my heart if I had not instantly spotted the clearance sticker from the cheap corner store down the street. Chloe walked in like she was visiting some primitive log cabin out in the woods. She wore that exact same air of pure condescension that she always reserved exclusively for my humble home. "It is so incredibly hot in here, Alice." Those were her very first words as she fanned herself dramatically with her hand. "Have you never considered installing central air conditioning? At my age, these old bones actually appreciate a little bit of warmth." I answered her with a polite smile that completely failed to reach my eyes. What I did not say was that my entire budget for a new air conditioning unit had gone straight toward paying her luxury rent. Chloe was wearing a stunning red dress that looked like it came straight out of a high-end designer window display. Her expensive high heels clicked loudly across my tiled floors. She was wearing expensive jewelry that sparkled brightly with every single move she made. Heavy gold earrings, a delicate diamond necklace. And then, with a sick knot forming deep in my stomach, I noticed a brand new bracelet. It had to be the exact same one Monica had mentioned to me. Throughout the long dinner, the conversation just flowed along the shallow surface. Emmett talked about a big job interview he had lined up for the following week. Chloe kept commenting on all the latest fashion trends up in New York, her beloved hometown that she never once stopped romanticizing. My mother just finished renovating her entire townhouse, she mentioned casually as she tasted the pot roast. She just has such exquisite taste. Everything in there is so incredibly modern, so perfectly elegant. Her critical eyes scanned all around my living room. She paused to look at my worn but well cared for furniture, at the window curtains I had sewn with my own 2 hands, at the small little souvenirs I had collected over a long lifetime. "You really should think about completely updating this place, Alice," she continued. She used that specific tone of voice that tried to sound highly helpful, but only ever managed to sound incredibly condescending. "My mom always says it is never too late for a total style makeover." Emmett looked pretty uncomfortable, but just like he always did, he kept completely quiet. His gaze was locked right onto his dinner plate. He was actively avoiding any eye contact with me whatsoever. His cell phone was resting right next to his glass. Every few minutes, he would glance down at it highly nervously. It was like he was urgently waiting for some kind of important call. "Your mother must be a truly extraordinary woman," I commented, pouring myself just a little bit more sweet tea. "You always talk about her with such intense admiration." "Oh, she absolutely is," Chloe replied, bursting with obvious pride. Even at her advanced age, she heavily manages her very own art gallery. She travels all over the world. She has the most enviable social circle. She paused for a brief second before adding her final thought. She just really knows how to keep herself highly relevant. The underlying, brutal insult just floated right there in the open air. Emmett coughed awkwardly, but he still did not step in to defend me at all. I served the slices of apple pie for dessert. I remembered how Emmett used to absolutely devour 2 whole pieces when he was a kid, always telling me it was the best pie in the entire world. But tonight, he barely even tasted it. He was way too distracted by his cell phone. "Are you expecting an important phone call, son?" I finally asked him. "No, Mom. I am just checking on a few things for work." "What work?" The harsh question slipped right out of my mouth before I could even stop myself. A deeply awkward silence fell completely over the dining table. Chloe was the very first one to violently break the quiet. "Emmett is just exploring some different options right now," she said, using a highly defensive tone. "It is just not easy to find a position that actually matches his high level." "Of course it is not," I replied. I very carefully placed my cloth napkin right down next to my plate. It must be terribly difficult, especially when the two of you have such massive expenses to cover. Chloe raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "We managed just fine." "I am so incredibly glad to hear that," I said. I could literally feel all the pure rage I had bottled up for months, desperately looking for a quick way out. "That brand new bracelet of yours is absolutely gorgeous, Chloe. It must have cost an absolute fortune." I saw the raw shock flash right across her face. It was quickly replaced by a very tight, forced smile. "Oh, it was just a nice gift from my mother. Like I said, she has exquisite taste in fine jewelry." "Your mother sounds truly extraordinary." "She really does," I said. I slowly stood up from my chair to start clearing the dirty dishes. "So incredibly generous with all her expensive gifts, all while she just happily lets someone else completely pay your rent for you." Emmett snapped his head up so incredibly fast. "Mom, what exactly are you insinuating right now?" "I am not insinuating a single thing, son." My firm voice sounded so much calmer than I actually felt inside. "I am simply observing the cold, hard facts." Chloe slammed her crystal glass down hard onto the table. Her eyes were practically glowing with a toxic mix of sheer indignation and pure superiority. "Look here, Alice. We highly appreciate your little bit of help, but you do not need to make such a massive deal out of it. This is just what families do for each other." "Help each other out?" I felt something physically snap deep inside my chest. It was something I had been heavily holding back for way too long. "Family?" I asked her so softly. "Is that really what we are? Is that what we are when you completely disrespect me right inside my own house? When you openly mock my home and my entire way of life?" "I have never done any such thing," Chloe protested loudly. But her highly guilty expression completely gave her away. "Mom, please. Chloe did not mean to," Emmett frantically started to say, but I cut him off instantly. "No, Emmett, do not you dare speak for her. It is finally time someone actually spoke the honest truth at this dinner table." The old clock in the kitchen ticked away the passing seconds. The sound was practically deafening in the dead silence that followed. Chloe sat up perfectly straight in her dining chair, her painted lips pressed tightly together into a very thin, hard line. "The actual truth is that you do not have the slightest clue how the real world works, Alice," she finally spat out. "You just live in the distant past. You desperately cling to your old, ratty furniture and your completely outdated customs. You are not even half the woman my mother is." Those cruel words dropped like a heavy butcher knife right onto the table. The dessert spoon completely froze in my trembling hand. The sweet smell of the baked apple pie just floated through the air while a dense, heavy silence completely filled every single corner of my dining room. Emmett kept his eyes glued firmly to the floor. His broad shoulders were completely tense. Chloe just stared right at me. She had this awful look of barely hidden satisfaction on her face. It was almost like she had been eagerly waiting for the absolute perfect moment to deliver that brutal blow. I stood up very slowly. My heart was pounding furiously against my ribs, but my voice remained perfectly steady when I finally spoke. "Well then, I guess your wonderful mother can just start paying your expensive rent over at the luxury high-rise on 5th Avenue, Building 43, 5th floor, Apartment B." Emmett's entire face went ghost white. His water glass tipped completely over, spilling ice water all across my mother's embroidered tablecloth. What rent?" he stammered out. His face was completely twisted in pure shock. "The monthly rent that I have been heavily paying for the two of you since this past February," I stated calmly. $2,000 every single month, plus the $200 in building management fees. $2,200 that I have paid perfectly on time, just so you two could live so incredibly comfortably. Chloe's arrogant smile vanished instantly. Her painted-on confidence completely cracked into pure, unadulterated confusion. Emmett remained completely speechless. His jaw practically hit the floor. For the very first time in so many long months, the absolute truth was finally mine to strongly hold on to, and I was no longer terrified to speak it out loud. The deep silence after my words was so incredibly heavy that it seemed to crush all the air right out of the room. Emmett blinked rapidly. It was almost as if he thought he could undo the harsh reality simply by refusing to accept it. Finally, his shaky voice shattered the silence. "Mom, I was really going to tell you. I actually got fired again 2 weeks ago." His sudden confession hit me right in the chest like a sledgehammer. Fired all over again. And yet, he had just let his awful wife walk right into my own house wearing a fancy designer dress. He let her treat me as if I were somehow completely inferior to her. Chloe snapped her head toward him. Her eyes were burning with pure rage. "You lost your new job again and you did not even bother to tell me?" Her voice spiked up to a shrill, piercing pitch. "Just last week, I blew $800 on a pair of shoes. I booked a full luxury spa day for my upcoming birthday. And you just let me do it while we are secretly completely broke?" Emmett ran his shaking hands right through his hair. It was the exact same nervous tic he had used since he was just a little kid. "I just thought I could fix the whole mess before you even noticed anything was wrong. I really did not want to let you down." I stared intently at the two of them. It was the absolute perfect picture of sheer arrogance crashing head-on into the brutal reality of total ruin. My chest physically ached, but not out of any sense of pity. It was from a deep rage so incredibly old that it somehow felt brand new all over again. "Expensive designer shoes and luxury spa treatments," I said very slowly, "all while I literally sold your dead father's wedding ring just to cover your monthly rent." The dining room fell completely silent once again, but this time it was not confusion floating through the air. It was pure, unadulterated shame. I stood up tall. I felt this completely unknown sense of firm strength rising up from deep inside me. For so many years, I had constantly bent over backward. I softened my own edges. I compromised absolutely everything. But in that exact moment, I was completely done giving in. "Emmett." "Chloe," I stated with absolute firmness, "your fancy lease agreement expires in exactly 30 days. And after that exact date, I will not pay a single penny more for your luxury apartment." Emmett's mouth dropped wide open. "Mom, you cannot do that to us. We will not have absolutely anywhere to go." "You really should have thought about that before you chose to lie straight to my face," I answered him. My tone of voice was not cruel at all. It was just crystal clear. Chloe slammed her open hand down hard on the table. "Good mothers do not just abandon their own children. My mother would absolutely never do something like this to me." I looked her dead in the eyes. "I am not abandoning my son. I am simply refusing to be violently used anymore. There is a massive difference." Emmett's eyes immediately filled up with hot tears. "Please, Mom, just give me one more chance. I promise I will find a solid job. I will fix all of this." I just gently shook my head. "Empty promises do not pay the rent, Emmett. Hard actions do. If you want to strongly prove something to me, start right now. But I am no longer going to be the easy safety net that lets you completely avoid your own responsibilities. for the very first time in years, I could literally feel the crushing weight of all their selfish expectations just sliding right off my tired shoulders. This was not about revenge at all. This was about pure survival. It was me finally choosing to heavily respect myself. When my front door finally clicked shut behind them, the apartment fell quiet in a way I had not heard in years. There were no more sharp, cruel words, no more nervous tapping. There was only the low hum of the kitchen refrigerator and the constant ticking of the old wall clock. I just stood right there by the kitchen sink. I rinsed the dirty plates under the warm water, watching exactly how the soap bubbles spun around and popped. My hands were visibly shaking. It was not out of weakness, though. It was from the sheer emotional release of absolutely everything I had been carrying all alone. That night, I sat down in my old rocking chair, the very same one that had kept me company through so many deep fevers and violent storms. I just listened to the soft creaking of the wood. For the very first time in months, I did not feel that crushing weight of anxiety pressing firmly down on my chest. When sleep finally came to me, it was incredibly deep and completely uninterrupted. I dreamed of absolutely nothing and everything all at once. True freedom, total peace, and the strange, quiet calm of knowing that a firm boundary had finally been drawn. At dawn, the bright morning sunlight poured right over the dining room table where the massive argument had just taken place. It was the exact same room, with the exact same furniture and the exact same walls, but it somehow felt completely different. It felt lighter. It was almost as if the house itself had just taken a deep breath. Exactly 2 days after that disastrous dinner, the jarring sound of the doorbell woke me up right before sunrise. The bedside clock read 5:38 in the morning. I quickly threw on my bathrobe and practically ran to the front door with my heart racing. Absolutely nobody brings good news at that hour of the morning. When I swung the door open, I found Emmett sitting right there on the porch floor. His back was slumped heavily against the wall, his eyes were totally bloodshot, and he reeked of cheap alcohol that I just could not ignore. "Mom," he mumbled. He tried to stand up but failed miserably. "I am so sorry. I just did not know where else to go." I helped him inside the house and sat him down heavily on the living room couch. While I brewed him a very strong cup of black coffee, I took a good look at his completely disheveled appearance. He had several days' worth of scruff, deep dark circles under his eyes, and he was wearing the exact same clothes from our terrible dinner 2 nights ago. "Chloe kicked me out," he finally confessed when I placed the steaming mug right into his trembling hands. "We got into a terrible screaming match right after we left your place. I told her I could not believe she was hiding money from her wealthy parents and refusing to use it for our rent. She screamed that it was her own cash, that she was saving it up for her own future. She told me I was nothing but a massive failure who could not even provide for his own family. A small part of me desperately wanted to say, 'I told you so.' Another part of me, the loving mother I will always be, just wanted to hug him tight and promise him everything was going to be perfectly fine, but I had finally learned my bitter lesson. "Where exactly have you been these past couple of days?" I asked, sitting down right across from him. "I slept in my car the first night. Yesterday, I crashed at James's place, but his girlfriend really does not want me staying there any longer. James had been his best friend since college. He was the best man at his wedding with Chloe." "Emmett," I said in a very firm but gentle tone, "I need you to tell me the absolute honest truth. Why did you really lose your first job, and why on earth did they fire you the second time?" My son hung his head in deep shame. He stared intently into his black coffee like it magically held all the tough answers I was looking for. When he finally managed to speak, his voice was nothing more than a faint whisper. The first time was actually the truth. It was the massive budget cuts from the pandemic. But I actually managed to land another job just 3 weeks later. I never told you because Chloe told me we could just use your financial help to save up some extra cash. She said we completely deserved to build up a huge financial cushion after going through such tough times. The sharp sting of this brand new betrayal pierced right through my chest like a long needle. But I just stayed totally quiet, waiting to hear the rest of it. I ended up losing that second job because they caught me gambling on my company computer. It was online sports betting. The ugly words just spilled out of his mouth in a frantic rush. It honestly started out as just a casual thing, just to pass the time. But then I started winning big, and I foolishly thought I could win back all the cash we had blown through. But then I started losing heavily, and I just kept blindly betting more and more, trying to recover absolutely everything I had lost. Exactly how much money do you owe, Emmett? My own voice sounded so bizarrely calm, even to my own ears. $40,000, he replied softly. I watched as the hot tears began streaming rapidly down his pale cheeks. I owe it to 3 completely different loan sharks. One of them has actually started actively threatening me. He says if I do not pay him back by the end of this week, he is going to... He left that terrifying sentence completely hanging in the air, but there was absolutely no need for him to finish it. I knew more than enough about ruthless loan sharks to easily imagine their violent threats. I slowly stood up and walked right over to the front window. The dark sky was just starting to clear up. It was painted in a pale pink color that promised yet another day of scorching, oppressive heat. Charleston was slowly waking up, completely unaware of the devastating drama unfolding right inside my tiny apartment. I simply do not have that kind of money, Emmett, I finally told him as I turned back around to face him. And even if I did have it, I absolutely would not give it to you. His messy face reflected total disbelief. Then sharp pain, and finally a very slow, agonizing wave of true understanding. I know you don't, Mom. I did not come over here to beg you for more cash. I came here because he had absolutely nowhere else in the world left to go. I looked at him very closely. I looked at this grown man who was my son. At some exact point along the way, I had completely failed him as a mother. Not by giving him way too little, but by giving him way too much of the absolute wrong things. I gave him endless protection instead of real responsibility. I gave him pure comfort instead of harsh consequences. You can stay here for exactly 3 nights, I finally declared. You will use that exact time frame to actively hunt for a job, any kind of job, and you will find a place to live that you can actually afford to pay for on your own. I will sit down and help you draw up a solid plan to pay off your massive debts, but you are going to have to execute it entirely by yourself. Thank you so much, Mom, he whispered. And for the very first time in a long while, I saw a tiny glimmer of real respect in his tired eyes. It was not just blind gratitude. That had always been way too easy for him. This was genuine, hard-earned respect. Later that morning, while Emmett slept soundly in his old childhood bedroom, I called up my good friend Paula. Her own son had overcome a horrible gambling addiction many years ago. I desperately needed some information about local support groups. I needed to know exactly how to help him without just enabling his terrible addiction further. I had to learn exactly how to draw a hard line right between unconditional love and toxic permissiveness. Alice, Paula told me gently after listening to my whole story. The very first thing you need to strictly understand is that this is absolutely not your fault, and the second thing is that you cannot fix him. Only he can actively save himself. Her honest words hurt so badly, but deep down in the bottom of my heart, I knew she was absolutely right. Those 3 short nights stretched right into a full week when Emmett finally managed to land a job as a night security guard at a big warehouse right on the outskirts of town. The pay was just minimum wage. The overnight hours were absolutely awful, but it was a solid start. He found a small room to rent inside a shared apartment right near his new job. It was a tiny, kind of depressing little place, but it was definitely affordable. Chloe, meanwhile, had completely emptied out their joint bank account before Emmett could even get his hands on a single penny. She packed up the vast majority of their expensive furniture and moved right back to New York to live with her rich parents. Her only form of communication was one incredibly cold text message: "I will mail you the divorce papers." The late nights were definitely the absolute worst for Emmett. The severe withdrawal from gambling caused him massive anxiety, endless insomnia, and a level of deep irritability that I had never, ever seen in him before. One dark night, I found him standing in the kitchen right at 3 in the morning. His hands were shaking so violently that he had actually shattered a glass cup just trying to fill it with tap water. "I just cannot do this, Mom," he sobbed hysterically when I wrapped my arms around him. I could literally feel his entire body shaking violently against mine. I just keep thinking that with one more bet, just one more huge bet, I could fix absolutely everything. I held him tight, just like I did when he was a little boy having bad nightmares. But this time around, I could not just scare the monsters away with a few soothing words and turning on the hallway light. "You can do this," I told him softly. "You are so much stronger than you think. You are the son of Michael Fletcher. He faced deadly danger every single day as a police officer, and he never backed down once. That exact same strength is right inside of you." The very next day, I went with him to his first ever Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I sat in a nearby coffee shop for 2 solid hours. I knit a long shawl just to keep myself highly distracted. I prayed silently to a God I was not even completely sure I still believed in anymore. When he finally walked out, his eyes were totally bloodshot. But he also had this tiny little spark that I had not seen in a very long time. It was pure determination. Throughout those tough weeks, my own emotions were just a massive, contradictory whirlwind. There were plenty of moments when I felt insanely guilty for not spotting the warning signs way earlier, for not stepping in when the terrible problem was just starting out. At other times, raw rage completely consumed me. I was so furious at his pathetic weakness, his endless lies, and the fact that he let Chloe treat me with such utter disdain while happily taking my hard-earned cash. And then, there were those crystal-clear moments where I finally understood that all this deep pain was absolutely necessary. Sometimes, the absolute greatest love you can possibly give is just actively letting someone face the brutal consequences of their own actions. One late afternoon, right after I got back from the community center where I taught my sewing classes, I caught Emmett looking through some old family photos. He stopped right on a picture of himself when he was just 10 years old. It was at his very first football game. His dad was kneeling down right next to him, and they were both grinning huge at the camera. "I barely even remember him, Mom," he said so incredibly softly. Sometimes I really wonder what he would have said about the terrible person I have become. I slowly sat down right next to him. I could physically feel the heavy weight of all those years and all those tough choices hanging right between us. "Your father would definitely be deeply disappointed by your massive mistakes, just like I am. But he would also be so incredibly proud to watch you trying so hard to fix them, just like I am." During the 3rd week, I went with Emmett to a local mental health clinic. A top psychologist who specialized in severe addictions evaluated him. The medical diagnosis was crystal clear. He had a severe gambling addiction, an intense anxiety disorder, and deep underlying depression. A lot of gambling addicts are actually just looking for a quick way to escape from something else, Dr. Taylor explained to me while Emmett was out in the hall filling out some medical paperwork. The real question here is, what exactly has your son been trying to completely escape from? That evening, while we were eating a very simple bowl of homemade soup, Emmett finally gave me the honest answer. "I just always felt like I had to be absolutely perfect for you, Mom. Like I desperately needed to make up for absolutely everything you ever sacrificed for me. When I first met Chloe, she just seemed so incredibly sure of everything. She was so wildly successful. I honestly thought that if I married her, I would finally be good enough. But the more I tried to impress her, the more I constantly felt like a massive failure. And the gambling made me feel like I actually had some real control. It made me feel like I could finally be the big hero that everyone completely expected me to be." His sad words completely shattered my heart. All this time, while I was endlessly sacrificing everything for him, I thought I was just giving him a much better life. But in reality, I was just loading him up with an invisible, crushing weight of high expectations and heavy emotional debts that he never once asked for. "I am so incredibly sorry, Emmett," I told him, reaching across the wooden table to firmly grab his hand. "I never wanted you to feel that way. You never needed to be perfect for me. You only ever needed to be yourself." At the very end of his 4th week staying with me, Emmett finally moved into his new rented room. The shared apartment was incredibly tiny and very basic. But for the very first time in his entire adult life, it was completely his. Paid for with his own hard work and true effort. On the day he packed up and left, he gave me this long, slightly awkward hug right by the front door. "I am going to call you every single week," he promised. "And Mom, thank you so much for not bailing me out this time." After he finally left, my old apartment felt quieter than it ever had before. I sat down in my wooden rocking chair and just let my hot tears flow freely. They were tears for the sweet little boy I had raised, tears for the broken man he had turned into, tears for all the massive mistakes we had both made. But they were also tears of deep relief, because I had finally found the real courage to love him the completely right way, even when that hard love meant I had to explicitly let him hit rock bottom. Exactly 1 week after Emmett moved out, I received a small notice to go pick up a certified letter at the local post office. It was incredibly strange. It had been literal years since anyone sent me any mail that was not just utility bills or junk flyers. The thick envelope had a postmark from Chicago and elegant handwriting that looked vaguely familiar to me. I waited until I got all the way back home to actually open it. I brewed myself a hot cup of tea while I just stared at the sealed envelope. It was almost like I thought it could just reveal its hidden secrets without even being opened. Finally, with slightly trembling fingers, I broke the paper seal and pulled out several handwritten pages. "My dearest Alice," the letter began, "I do not know if you even remember me after so many long years. It is Harvey Monroe, that foolish engineering student who just could not take his eyes off the most talented girl at the entire design school. The entire world seemed to completely stop spinning for a brief second. Harvey, my very first love, my old partner in dreaming. The sweet boy who had promised to take me to see the grand Pacific Ocean from every single coastline possible. The man whose young heart I completely shattered when I ultimately chose Michael and a quiet life in Charleston instead of following him all the way to Chicago. With my heart racing a mile a minute, I kept on reading. I have thought about you so many times over the passing years, especially after Claire, my dear wife, passed away 2 years ago. While I was sorting through some old photographs to make an album for my grandkids, I found that old picture of us standing right in front of the design school. You were wearing that beautiful white cotton dress with the red flowers that you had sewn yourself. It was so gorgeous that all the professors constantly complimented you. And there I was, wearing that totally ridiculous jacket that I honestly thought made me look so sophisticated. I kept wondering whatever happened to that incredibly talented young woman who dreamed of completely revolutionizing American fashion. A quick internet search led me right to an article in the local Charleston newspaper. It showed a lovely picture of you teaching sewing to young immigrant children. Seeing you again after all these years, with your hair now snow white but flashing that exact same bright smile, woke up something deep inside me that I honestly thought was long gone. Would you possibly like to reconnect? Alice, I have absolutely no huge expectations, just some genuine curiosity, and perhaps a strong desire to close up some circles that were left wide open. If you are open to it, I would absolutely love to invite you up to Chicago, just as old friends, to sit and talk, to finally share the long stories of our lives. My phone number is written at the very bottom of this letter. Whatever your decision is, I am just so genuinely happy to have found your trace again in this massive world. With deepest affection, Harvey. I let the heavy letter drop right onto the table and slowly stood up. I suddenly felt incredibly dizzy. I walked straight over to the window and pushed it wide open. I let the warm afternoon breeze blow inside to try and help me clear my spinning mind. Harvey Monroe. The very first man who ever made me feel like my big dreams actually mattered. The one who saw me not just as a pretty girl, but as a true creator, a brilliant artist. I instantly remembered our very last meeting together. It was at that little coffee shop right near the old campus, I remembered how I had cried my eyes out telling him that I was pregnant, that Michael and I were going to get married, and that I was completely giving up my massive scholarship at the design school. "You really do not have to do this, Alice," he had insisted, holding both my hands tightly across the table. "You can come with me to Chicago. There are always solutions. There are options." But I had already made my final decision. I deeply loved Michael, with his perfectly pressed police uniform and his intense sense of duty. I felt incredibly safe with him, completely protected in a massive world that, for a young girl from such humble beginnings like me, just seemed way too big and terrifying. So Harvey had moved all the way up to Chicago completely alone. Over the passing years, I heard through mutual friends that he had become a wildly successful engineer, that he had founded a massive textile technology firm, that he had married a brilliant architect from the city, and that they had 3 beautiful children together. My own quiet life with Michael had just run its natural course down in Charleston. It was deeply happy in its own unique way, right up until cruel fate snatched him away from us way too soon. And now, 50 long years later, our 2 paths were suddenly crossing all over again. I picked up the telephone several different times throughout that afternoon. I dialed the first few digits of the number Harvey had left me, only to slam the phone down before I ever actually completed the call. What on earth would I even say to him? What was honestly left of that highly ambitious young girl he had once known? Would he even be the slightest bit interested in the old woman I had actually become? That night, I pulled out an old cardboard box from the very back of my closet. It was one I rarely ever opened. It contained the few original designs I had actually kept from that era of my life. Pencil sketches and watercolor paintings of beautiful dresses I never got to create. Half-developed sewing patterns. Carefully labeled little fabric swatches. Right in the middle of them was my final project for that huge scholarship. It was a stunning design for a collection inspired by classic Southern traditions, but with a sharp contemporary focus. Professor Martin had openly said that it had the massive potential to completely revolutionize the way people viewed traditional American fashion. I ran my shaking fingers over the old drawings. I was genuinely shocked that the bright colors had barely lost any of their vividness after so many decades. This truly had been me once upon a time, bold, wildly innovative, and completely full of bright dreams. Bright and early the next morning, right before I could change my stubborn mind, I dialed Harvey's phone number. "Hello?" His deep voice sounded so much graver, a lot more measured now, but I instantly recognized that slight Midwestern twang mixed with the smooth drawl from his hometown down in New Orleans. "Harvey," I said, feeling a massive lump form right in my throat. "It is Alice Fletcher." The dead silence on the other end of the line was so incredibly long that for a brief moment I honestly thought the call had completely dropped. "Alice," he finally whispered. I could literally hear the bright smile beaming through his deep voice. "I was not entirely sure you would actually call me." "I was not sure either," I confessed, totally surprised by my own blunt honesty. "Your letter completely took me by surprise." "A good surprise, I hope?" "Highly unexpected," I replied. "But yes, it was a very good one." The entire conversation just flowed with an absolute ease that totally caught me off guard. We talked all about our long lives, our families, and the many decades that had completely flown right by. He told me all about his massive company, Monroe Textiles, which was now being completely run by his oldest son. He talked about his gorgeous house up in the Gold Coast neighborhood with those sweeping views of the lake that he loved so much. He spoke about Claire, his beloved wife, who had passed away from cancer, and how the last 2 years had been a very slow, painful process of rediscovering how to live life without her. I told him all about Michael, about Emmett, about my tiny little sewing workshop. I completely left out all the massive recent problems, the ugly difficulties with Chloe, and my son's terrible addiction. It was way too soon, and far too personal. "Do you still remember our old promise?" he asked me after almost an hour of talking. "The one about seeing the grand Pacific Ocean together from every single coastline possible?" "I remember it perfectly," I replied. I felt a sudden warmth rushing right to my cheeks that I had not experienced in decades. I only managed to fulfill half of it. I have seen the ocean from California, from Oregon, from Seattle, but I never went down to see it from Charleston. Not after. Well, you know, I completely understand, I said very softly. Alice. His tone of voice grew noticeably more serious. I would really love to invite you to come visit Chicago, just for one weekend. Absolutely zero pressure. Completely zero expectations. Just two very old friends finally catching up, looking out at the water together, exactly like we promised so long ago. My immediate first impulse was to instantly reject the offer. It was pure madness. I was 70 years old. I was way too old for wild adventures, for cheesy romantic reunions, and for sudden second chances. But right then, I painfully remembered that awful dinner with Chloe. Her sheer contempt, her vicious words, "You are not even half the woman my mother is." I firmly remembered the massive decision I had made that exact night. I was never going to be invisible again. I would absolutely love that, I answered him. I genuinely surprised my own self. But I really have to check my tight schedule first. I will call you tomorrow to confirm everything. After I hung up the call, I just stared down at the telephone like it was some kind of strange alien object. I kept asking myself what on earth I had just done. A huge part of me felt totally ridiculous. I felt like a giddy teenager getting wildly excited over a first date. But another part of me felt more incredibly alive than I had felt in literal years. I could not sleep a single wink that night. I mentally reviewed my entire closet. I kept wondering exactly what kind of clothes would even be appropriate for a big trip up to Chicago. I wondered if any of my old handmade dresses would still work. I thought about my white hair, my deep wrinkles, and my aging body that was no longer the young girl that Harvey had once known so well. Would he be horribly disappointed when he finally saw me? Would I just feel totally out of place in his highly sophisticated, wealthy Chicago life? But more than anything else, I thought heavily about Emmett, about his current extreme fragility and his incredibly tough recovery process. Would it be incredibly selfish to just leave him right in this vulnerable moment, just so I could chase a fading echo of my own youth? The very next morning, I called the mental health clinic where Emmett was receiving his treatment. I asked to speak directly with Dr. Taylor. "Mrs. Fletcher," the doctor greeted me warmly. "How can I help you today?" I fully explained my huge dilemma to him, feeling slightly embarrassed to be consulting him about something so deeply personal. "Alice," he responded after listening to me very carefully. "A huge part of Emmett's recovery process is finally learning that he absolutely cannot depend on you to save him. Your brief absence for just one weekend will not only not harm his tough treatment, but it could actually be highly beneficial for him. He really needs to know that you have your own separate life, your own personal joys. Parents of struggling addicts often get trapped in a toxic cycle of endless sacrifice that honestly does not help anyone." His sharp words deeply resonated with me. They perfectly reflected what I had already begun to slowly understand, that my constant willingness to sacrifice everything for Emmett had not been completely altruistic at all. It had honestly been, in a massive part, a clever form of control, a desperate way to always feel necessary, a way to completely define my own self through his endless dependency. Right after that phone call, I sent a quick text message to Emmett. I asked him to come over for dinner that night if his new work schedule allowed it. I desperately needed to speak with him face to face. He arrived right at 9 o'clock. He looked exhausted, but honestly much healthier than I had seen him in literal months. He had put on a little bit of healthy weight, and that terrible, feverish shine of active addiction had finally disappeared from his eyes. While we ate a very simple potato omelet for dinner, I told him all about Harvey, about the huge invitation to Chicago, about all my deepest doubts. "Wait a second," he interrupted me, flashing a massive, incredulous smile. "Are you seriously telling me that you have the golden opportunity to reunite with your childhood sweetheart up in Chicago and you are actually hesitating? Who exactly are you? And what have you done with my real mother?" His unexpected reaction completely threw me off. Emmett, it is really not that simple. I am 70 years old. I barely know him anymore, and you are going through a difficult time. Mom, he said, taking my hands across the table, my whole life I have seen you put off your happiness for others, for Dad, for me, even for that witch Carrie. The mention of his ex-wife still brought a shadow to his eyes, but he continued, It is time you think about yourself for once. Go to New York, meet this Jack, have fun. You deserve it more than anyone. Will you be okay? I asked, feeling a knot in my chest loosen that I did not know existed. I will be fine, he stated with a certainty that surprised me. I have my meetings, my therapist, my job, and if I need anything, I will call my Gamblers Anonymous sponsor. It is time I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. That night, after Eric left, I called Jack to confirm my visit. We agreed that I would travel to New York on the first weekend of August. Barely 2 weeks later, the days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. I bought a new dress, my first personal treat in years. I checked the flight schedules. I booked a ticket. I packed a small suitcase, constantly wondering if I was doing something crazy. The night before the trip, while mentally reviewing everything I had packed, the doorbell rang. It was Eric, with a small package in his hands. A Bon Voyage gift, he said, handing it to me with a shy smile. Inside was a new cell phone, much more modern than the old model I used. So, you can send me pictures of New York, he explained, and so I can make sure you are doing well. I hugged him tightly, moved by this gesture, by this role reversal where he was now the one worrying about me. Eric, I said as I walked him to the door. Do you think I am being ridiculous? An old woman chasing ghosts from the past? My son looked at me with a seriousness he rarely showed. I think you are a brave woman giving yourself a chance to be happy, and I think it is never too late for that. That night, I took one last thing from the bottom of my drawer to take to New York, a small, framed sketch, my last design before dropping out of college. A stunning evening gown inspired by the local Florida summer festivals, with layers that mimicked fire and details that evoked traditional monuments. I placed it carefully among my clothes, a bridge between the young girl I had been and the woman I could still become. The airport terminal was buzzing with activity that August morning. Tourists with hats and cameras, families with excited children, executives with briefcases hurrying their pace, and me, Alexa Foster, standing in the middle of the chaos with my small suitcase, feeling my heart beating so hard I feared everyone else could hear it. Eric had insisted on accompanying me to the airport, a gesture I appreciated more than I could express. While we waited at the gate, I noticed how different he looked, not just physically, although he had gained some weight. He had cut his hair and was wearing simple but clean clothes, but mostly it was his attitude. There was a calmness about him, a presence that was missing before. "Are you nervous?" he asked, watching me with a mix of amusement and concern. Terrified, I confessed, unnecessarily adjusting the collar of my blouse. What if he does not like me anymore? What if we have nothing to say to each other? What if it turns out to be wonderful, and you discover there are still adventures waiting for you at 70 years old? He finished, squeezing my hand. Stop looking for problems before they arrive. Mom, that has always been your superpower. I smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. Throughout my entire adult life, I had been an expert at anticipating disasters, at planning for the worst possible scenario. It was a skill that had served me well as a single mother during hard times, but it had also robbed me of many potential joys. The plane arrived right on time. A sleek, silver aircraft that looked like something out of a futuristic movie. Eric helped me with my suitcase and gave me an awkward but sincere hug. "Have fun, Mom. You deserve it." I looked at him one last time before stepping onto the plane. This son of mine who finally seemed to be finding his way. "I will call you when I get there," I promised. "Do not worry about me," he replied with a smile. "Worry about enjoying yourself." The flight to New York took barely 2.5 hours, but for me, it was like crossing decades. Every mile brought me closer, not just to a city, but to a version of myself I had abandoned a long time ago. I looked out the window, watching the East Coast landscape roll by. The orange groves, the distant rolling hills, the occasional glimpses of the ocean. I thought about all the decisions that had brought me to this moment, about the sacrifices and the accomplishments, about Michael, about Eric, about the life I had built. I did not regret my fundamental choices. I loved Michael deeply, and I would not change the years we had together. I loved my son, despite our recent challenges. But I wondered if I could have found a path that allowed me to be a mother, a wife, and also myself. If I could have kept some of my dreams alive while living the realities I chose. Jack was waiting for me at the airport, just as we had agreed. I recognized him immediately, despite the decades that had passed. The completely white hair, the wrinkles around his eyes, the cane he leaned on slightly. But the smile, that smile that once brightened my college days, remained exactly the same. "Alexa," he said when I approached, his voice mixing nervousness and pure joy, "you look beautiful." At any other time, with any other person, I would have dismissed the compliment. I would have pointed out my gray hair, my wrinkles, my figure that was no longer that of my 20-year-old self. But something in the way he looked at me, not with nostalgia for what had been, but with appreciation for who I was now, stopped me. "You look very handsome too, Jack," I replied, and it was true. The years had given him a dignity that perfectly complemented the enthusiastic young man I remembered. He took my small suitcase and offered me his free arm. "I have the car parked nearby. I thought we could go to your hotel first so you can settle in, and then maybe take a walk and grab a bite to eat, unless you are too tired from the trip." "I am not tired at all," I replied, surprised by the energy I felt bubbling inside me. "A walk sounds perfect." The hotel Jack had recommended was in Greenwich Village, on a quiet street but close to everything. It was modest but charming, with a small balcony where you could catch a distant glimpse of the water. "I figured you would like this neighborhood," he explained while we drank coffee on the hotel terrace after I checked in. "It has some of the spirit of old Florida but with a New York touch." He was right. The narrow streets, the small shops, the mix of traditional and modern. Everything reminded me of the neighborhood where I grew up, but with a cosmopolitan vibe that Florida was only just starting to develop when I was young. We spent the afternoon walking slowly through the streets of the village. Jack, despite his cane, knew every corner and proudly showed me his adopted neighborhood. He pointed out the bakery where he bought his fresh bread every morning, the park where his grandkids played when they visited, the bookstore where he joined a reading club for restless retirees, as he called them. The conversation flowed with a naturalness that surprised me. We talked about books, politics, art, our children and grandchildren, the places we had visited, and the ones we still dreamed of seeing. By dinner time, I felt like we had picked up a conversation interrupted yesterday, not 50 years ago. We had dinner at a small restaurant where the waiter greeted him by name and served us classic New York dishes that Jack insisted I try. "So tell me, Alexa," he asked while we shared a dessert, "what really happened these last few months that made you agree to come to New York? I sense there have been major changes in your life." I looked at him, surprised by his intuition. "Why do you think that?" "Because I know you," he replied simply. "Or at least I knew the Alexa from 50 years ago. And that Alexa would have needed an emotional earthquake to dare to do something like this." His honesty disarmed me. During dinner, I told him everything. About Eric and Carrie, about the rent I paid for months, about my son's gambling addiction and his slow road to recovery, about the night I finally refused to remain invisible. Jack listened closely, without interrupting, his eyes reflecting understanding and occasional outrage on my behalf. "You have been incredibly brave," he said when I finished my story. "Many parents never find the strength to set boundaries like that." "I did not feel brave," I confessed. "I felt terrible, like I was abandoning my son when he needed me the most." "But you did not abandon him," he pointed out. "You gave him something much more valuable than money or a place to stay. You gave him the opportunity to find his own strength." His words resonated deeply within me, articulating something I had felt but had been unable to express. We walked back to the hotel under the starry New York sky. At the door, Jack gently took my hand. "Tomorrow, I was thinking of showing you some spots around the city, if that sounds good to you. Grand Central Terminal, Central Park, maybe the historic downtown district." "I would love that," I replied, surprised by how natural this new ritual of making plans together felt. "And Alexa," he added, with sudden seriousness, "I want you to know I have no expectations, just the pleasure of your company and the joy of showing you my city." I felt an unexpected warmth in my cheeks. "Thank you, Jack. I am also really enjoying being here." We said goodbye with a light kiss on the cheek, and I went up to my room with a strange mix of emotions. Joy for this unexpected reunion, nostalgia for the lost years, and a tingling of anticipation I had not felt in decades. Before going to bed, I called Eric as I had promised. He answered on the second ring, his voice clear and alert despite the hour. "Mom, how is everything going? What is New York like? What is he like?" His enthusiasm made me laugh. "Everything is going well, son. New York is beautiful, even though I have barely seen a small part of it, and Jack is. He is kind, interesting. It is strange and familiar all at once. Is he treating you right?" The question had a protective tone I had never heard in Eric's voice. "Perfectly," I assured him. "He is a total gentleman. And you? How are you doing?" "I am good. Mom, I had my Gamblers Anonymous meeting this afternoon and I got an extra job for the weekends, cleaning offices. It is not glamorous, but it is extra income to pay off my debts faster." Pride swelled in my chest. "I am so proud of you, Eric. And I am proud of you, Mom," he replied, surprising me, "for daring to take this adventure, for not giving up on life." After hanging up, I stood looking out the window at the lights of New York, the city that could have been my home in a different life, the city that was now offering me, perhaps, a fresh start. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without any worries about tomorrow, only with the sweet anticipation of what it might bring. The New York sun streamed through my hotel room balcony when I woke up that morning. I laid there for a few minutes, watching the light dance on the walls, listening to the sounds of the waking city. The distant hum of a subway train, the metal grates of storefronts rolling up, the conversations in English that floated up from the street. I got up with an energy I had not felt in years. I dressed carefully, choosing a coral linen dress I had sewn especially for this trip. And I brushed the white hair I had decided to stop dyeing a long time ago. In front of the mirror, I saw a 70-year-old woman with wrinkles that told stories and eyes that still shined with curiosity. I was not the young girl Jack had known, but I did not want to be her either. This version of myself had gained a wisdom that only comes with years and scars. Jack was waiting for me in the lobby, punctual as always. He was wearing light slacks, a blue shirt, and a Panama hat that gave him a distinguished look. When he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that erased decades from his appearance. "Good morning, Alexa," he greeted me, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "You look radiant." "The New York air must agree with me," I replied, surprised by how easy it was to accept his compliments. "I have a whole itinerary planned," he announced as we stepped out into the sunny street. "If it seems like too much, just tell me. At our age, there is no need to feel obligated to do intense sightseeing." I laughed, grateful for his consideration and for the shared connection implied by that "our age." "I am tougher than I look," I assured him. "I raised a son on my own and ran a tailoring business for 40 years. I can handle New York." We started the day with breakfast on a Fifth Avenue terrace, where I tried an authentic New York bagel with cream cheese for the first time. Then we visited Grand Central Terminal, where the light beamed through the massive windows, creating a spectacular show of shadows that left me breathless. "I have lived in New York for 40 years, and every time I walk in here I feel the same way," Jack confessed, as we admired the majesty of the station, as if it were his first time. We walked down Fifth Avenue, admiring the historic facades, and had lunch at a small restaurant in the downtown district where everyone seemed to know Jack. "How did you end up in the textile fashion world?" I asked him while we shared a seafood dish that, I admitted to myself, rivaled the best catches in Florida. Because of you, actually, he replied, surprising me. After we split up, I stayed in engineering, but I specialized in textile technology. I guess it was my way of keeping a connection to what you loved. Over the years, I founded my own company developing technologies for the fashion industry. Smart fabrics, more sustainable dyeing processes, that kind of thing. His confession moved me deeply. While I had abandoned my dreams of design, he had found a way to honor them through his own path. "I have something to show you," I said impulsively, remembering the sketch I had brought with me. "But not here. Maybe later, after lunch." We visited Central Park, where the rolling landscapes seemed to defy both gravity and the passage of time. We sat on a famous winding bench, looking out at the city skyline stretching toward the water. "Did you ever regret it?" Jack asked after a comfortable silence. Not coming to New York, not continuing with design. The question I had feared, the one I had asked myself so many times over the years. "Yes and no," I answered honestly. I loved Michael. I loved raising Eric, even with all the hardships. But there were moments. My voice faded as I searched for the right words. "Moments," he encouraged gently. Moments when I would watch a fashion show on television or see a magazine with new collections, and I felt a pain so sharp it took my breath away, as if something inside me was screaming, "That could have been your world." But then Eric would run in with a drawing or a school problem, and the moment would pass. Jack nodded, understanding. The roads not taken always haunt us a little, do they not? I often wondered what my life would have been like if you had come with me. "Were you happy with Caroline?" I asked, genuinely interested. His face softened at the mention of his late wife, deeply. She was an extraordinary woman, brilliant, compassionate, with a sense of humor that could light up the darkest days. We had our challenges, like all couples, but I never doubted that I was lucky to find her. "I am glad," I said sincerely. "You deserved that happiness." "So did you, Alexa. Were you happy with Michael?" "Yes, in our own way. He was a good man, responsible, honest, dedicated to his family. He did not share my passion for art or fashion, but he respected that it was important to me, even if he never fully understood why." We sat in silence, each absorbing the other's confessions, the parallel lives we had lived apart. "I have a proposal," Jack finally said, turning to look directly at me. "Tomorrow is Sunday. I would like to take you to meet my family. My kids, their spouses, my grandkids. We have a family dinner every 2 weeks. You do not have to accept if it feels like too much or too soon." The invitation took me by surprise. It was a significant step. Meeting his family meant I was more than a nostalgic curiosity to him, more than a briefly revived memory. "I would love to," I replied, surprising myself with how easily I made the decision. "Perfect," he smiled, visibly relieved. "And tonight, if you are not too tired, I would like to take you to a special place." The special place turned out to be a small restaurant by the harbor, where the terrace tables offered an uninterrupted view of the Atlantic Ocean. The sun was starting to set, tinting the water with golden and pink hues that looked like something out of an impressionist painting. "At last," Jack said softly, as we sat down, "after 50 years, we are finally looking at the ocean together, just like we promised." The knot that formed in my throat prevented me from answering. Instead, I took the framed sketch I had brought with me out of my purse. "I wanted to show you this," I said, handing it to him, "my last design before dropping out of college." Jack took it carefully, studying it closely. His eyes watered as he traced the outlines of the dress with his finger. "I remember this," he finally said. "You showed it to me the week before you told me you were pregnant. You said it would be the first design of your collection for the final project." I was amazed he remembered it with such precision. "I never actually made it," I confessed. "I kept it all these years as a reminder of what could have been. It is extraordinary." "Alexa, you always had a unique talent." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a warmth in my cheeks that was not just from the setting sun. "But that was a long time ago. I am no longer that ambitious young girl." "Perhaps not," he said, handing the sketch back to me. "But talent does not disappear with age. It just evolves, like us." During dinner, under the stars that were beginning to appear and with the soft sound of the waves as background music, Jack told me about his current projects. Although he was officially retired, he still worked as a consultant for his company, now run by his oldest son, Ryan. But my real passion these days is a foundation we created with Caroline 10 years ago, he explained. We work with immigrant women, teaching them traditional textile trades and helping them market their products. It is small, but growing. That sounds wonderful, I replied, genuinely impressed. Something similar to what I do in Florida with immigrant kids, but on a larger scale. His eyes sparkled with youthful enthusiasm. Exactly. In fact, no. That is crazy. What is crazy? I asked, intrigued by his sudden hesitation. I was going to suggest that maybe you could visit the foundation during your stay, maybe even collaborate in some way. But we just reconnected after 50 years. I do not want to overwhelm you with my projects. I would love to visit the foundation, I said without hesitation. You know, teaching and sewing are my two passions. His smile lit up his face in a way that took me right back to our youth. For a moment, I saw the 22-year-old boy who had promised me the world, superimposed on the 72-year-old man who was now offering me a new kind of connection. Walking back to the hotel slowly under the starry New York sky, our hands accidentally brushed. Without thinking, I intertwined my fingers with his. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, like returning to a home that had never truly been mine. Thank you for today, I said when we reached the hotel entrance. It has been magical, he finished, and I nodded, grateful for the perfect word. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, and placed a soft kiss on my lips. It was brief, almost chaste, but it sent an electric current through my entire body. See you tomorrow, Alexa, he said, walking away with a smile. Rest well. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Eric. How is the weekend going, Mom? He asked, his voice sounding genuinely interested. I told him about Grand Central Terminal, Central Park, the dinner by the ocean. I did not mention the kiss, feeling a teenage modesty that made me laugh internally. You sound happy, he commented. Different. I feel different, I admitted, as if I were waking up from a long sleep. I am happy for you, Mom. You deserve it more than anyone. He paused before adding. By the way, I had my monthly evaluation with Dr. Taylor today. He says I am making significant progress. That is wonderful. Son, I replied, feeling a wave of pride, I am so proud of you. It is strange, he reflected. It seems like we are both starting new lives at the exact same time. After hanging up, I stared at the New York lights from my window. Eric was right. We were both in a process of rebirth, finding parts of ourselves that had been dormant or lost. With that comforting thought, I slipped between the sheets and fell into a deep, restful sleep, free of the worries that had been my constant companions for so long. Jack's house was exactly as I had imagined. An elegant, historic brownstone in Greenwich Village, with wrought iron balconies and a terrace that offered views of the New York skyline and, in the distance, the shimmering blue of the water. I arrived at the family dinner with a bouquet of flowers and a pie I had bought at a bakery recommended by the hotel receptionist. Jack greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek and a handshake that conveyed both support and shared nervousness. They are all very excited to meet you, he assured me as he guided me inside. I have talked about you so much these past few days that they are intrigued. What exactly did you tell them? I asked, suddenly worried about the expectations he might have created. The truth, he replied simply, that you are a very special old friend, someone who was important in my youth and who has unexpectedly re-entered my life. The living room was spacious and bright, decorated with an exquisite taste that mixed traditional American pieces with contemporary art. On the walls, I saw family photographs. A younger Jack with a beautiful woman I assumed was Caroline, children in different stages of growing up, celebrations, and everyday moments captured over the decades. One by one, I was introduced to Jack's family. Ryan, the oldest son, a man of about 45 who had his father's smile and ran the family business. his wife Morgan, a pediatrician, and their 2 teenage kids, Mark and Lily. Then I met Ellen, the middle daughter, a college art history professor, with her husband Charlie and their young son Matthew. Lastly, Isabella, the youngest, an elegant woman of about 38, an interior designer, who arrived alone and was the only one who seemed to evaluate me with some reservation. The meal passed in a lively atmosphere. The Montero family clearly had a habit of lively debates and parallel conversations. They bombarded me with questions about Florida, about my work as a seamstress, about how I had met Jack in our youth. I answered as best I could, surprised by how easy it was to feel comfortable among them. Only Isabella maintained a polite but noticeable distance. During dessert, when the conversation split into smaller groups, she sat next to me with a glass of wine in her hand. "My father told us you two were very close before he met my mother," she said without beating around the bush. "That is right," I replied, maintaining a friendly but cautious tone. "We were very young back then. He says you were his first true love." I felt a sudden heat in my cheeks. We were 20 years old. At that age, everything feels more intense, more definitive. "My mother passed away only 2 years ago," she continued, with a look that evaluated my every reaction. "My father misses her terribly." I understood her attitude then. Isabella was protecting her mother's memory, worried that this sudden reappearance of a past love might somehow diminish what Jack and Caroline had shared. "Your mother must have been an extraordinary woman," I said sincerely. "Jack speaks of her with such love and admiration. I would have loved to meet her." Isabella seemed surprised by my answer. She finally said, her expression softening slightly. "Brilliant, strong, compassionate, the kind of person who lit up any room." "And she raised 3 wonderful children," I added, noticing how her posture visibly relaxed. "That says a lot about her." "Do you have children?" she asked, seeming genuinely interested for the first time. "One son, Eric, and a complicated relationship with my ex-daughter-in-law," I replied, and proceeded to give her a summarized version of the recent events with Carrie and Eric's addiction. To my surprise, Isabella listened with attention and empathy. "It must have been very hard to set those boundaries with your son," she commented when I finished. "It requires a lot of courage, the kind of courage you only find when you have no other choice." I admit it. Our conversation was interrupted by Matthew, the youngest grandson, who ran over to show me a drawing he had made. While I admired it with the appropriate enthusiasm, I noticed Isabella watching me with a warmer expression. After the meal, while the others helped clear the table or played with the kids, Jack invited me out to the terrace. We leaned against the railing, gazing at the city bathed in the golden afternoon light. "What do you think of my family?" he asked, in a tone that tried to sound casual but revealed a certain anxiety. "They are wonderful," I answered honestly. "You can tell there is a lot of love and respect between you all." "Even Isabella?" he asked with a knowing smile. "I saw you two having a pretty intense conversation." "Isabella loves her mother deeply and wants to protect her memory," I said. "I cannot blame her for that. In fact, I find it admirable." Jack sighed, his gaze drifting to the horizon. Isabella was the closest to Caroline. She took her illness and death the hardest. I fear she will never fully get over that loss. "Grief has no deadlines," I commented, thinking of my own process after Michael's death. "Everyone experiences it in their own way and at their own pace." "That is exactly what Caroline would have said," he replied, looking at me with an expression I could not interpret. "You were right earlier. You two would have gotten along well." We stood in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Jack spoke again, his voice lower and more personal. "You know, after Caroline died, I thought that part of my life was over, that at my age all that was left was to wait, surrounded by family, but essentially alone in a deep sense." He paused, searching for the right words. "And then I found you again. Or I looked for you, to be honest, and I realized that maybe there were still chapters left to write." His confession moved me deeply. "I thought something similar," I admitted, "that I had already lived my life, that what was left was just an epilogue, taking care of Eric, growing old quietly, fading away little by little." "And now?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "Now I am not so sure," I answered honestly. "These past 2 days in New York have made me feel more alive than I have felt in decades." His hand found mine on the railing. "I would like to invite you to come live in New York, Alexa." The proposal left me breathless. It was the last thing I expected to hear, at least so soon. "Jack, we have barely just reconnected. 50 years have passed. We are practically strangers. And yet, I know you," he replied softly. "I know your heart, your spirit. The rest are just details we can discover together. And your family. Isabella is barely starting to accept me. My family respects my happiness," he said with conviction. "And with you, I feel happy in a way I did not think possible again." "My life is in Florida," I argued weakly. "My apartment, my classes at the community center, my friends." "I am not asking you to abandon all of that immediately," he clarified. "We could start slowly. Longer visits, see how it works out. My offer is just a door I am opening for you, not a demand." I remained silent, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was considering. Leaving Florida, the state where I had lived my entire adult life, starting something new at 70 years old. It was terrifying and at the same time strangely liberating. "I need time to think about it," I finally said. "There is a lot to consider." "Of course," he agreed, understanding. "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." We went back inside where the family had gathered for a game of cards. Isabella smiled at me timidly when I walked in, a small gesture that felt like a major victory. The afternoon passed amid laughter, family anecdotes, and more than one embarrassing story about Jack that his kids were thrilled to share with me. I found myself laughing like I had not in years, feeling like part of something vibrant and warm. As night fell, Ryan offered to take me back to the hotel. In the car, he surprised me with a direct question. "What are your intentions with my father, Alexa?" The question, though expected in a way, caught me off guard with its bluntness. "Honestly, Ryan, I am as surprised by all of this as you are," I replied after a moment. "I did not come to New York looking for a relationship. I just wanted to close a chapter of my life that had been left unfinished." He glanced at me briefly before turning his attention back to the road. "My father is an extraordinary man. He suffered a great deal during my mother's illness. I would hate to see him hurt again. That is the last thing I would want," I assured him. "Your father means a lot to me. Even though we are just rediscovering each other, I promise you I will be careful with his feelings, whatever decisions we make." Ryan nodded, apparently satisfied with my answer. "You know, you have brought a sparkle back to his eyes that we have not seen since before Mom got sick. For that alone, I am already grateful to you." His words stayed with me until I reached the hotel, where I said goodbye to him with a hug that started out formal but ended up being surprisingly warm. That night, in the solitude of my room, I called Eric. I needed his perspective, his advice, something I never would have imagined needing from my son just a few months ago. He asked me to consider moving to New York, I told him after bringing him up to speed on the family dinner. There was silence on the other end of the line. "And what do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I do not know," I confessed. "A part of me is thrilled with the idea. New York is vibrant, beautiful, full of culture. Jack makes me feel alive, valued. His family is lovely, for the most part. And there is his foundation, where I could teach sewing, feel useful in a new way." "But?" he asked, sensing my hesitation. "But Florida is my home. My whole life is there. And you are at a vulnerable point. I do not want to abandon you when you are rebuilding your life." Eric sighed on the other end of the phone. "Mom, your whole life you have made choices based on what I needed. For once, I want you to think about what you need." "It is not that simple," I protested. "Yes, it is," he insisted with a firmness that surprised me. "I am fine, Mom. I have my job, my Gamblers Anonymous meetings, my therapist. I am learning to stand on my own. I do not need you to stay in Florida for me. And if you relapse?" The question I feared asking the most. "If I relapse, it will be my responsibility, not yours," he replied with a maturity that left me speechless. "Besides, New York is not that far away. We can visit each other. I can call you when I need to. But you cannot put your life on hold for fear that I might make mistakes. That is not fair to either of us." His words resonated deeply with me, reflecting the fundamental shift that had taken place in our dynamic. I was no longer the overprotective mother, and he was no longer the dependent son. We were becoming two adults supporting each other out of respect and independence. "Thank you, Eric," I finally said, my voice cracking with emotion. "You have no idea what it means to me to hear you speak like this." "I love you, Mom," he replied simply, "and I want to see you happy. You deserve it more than anyone." After hanging up, I stepped out onto the small balcony of my room. The New York night shined with thousands of lights, and in the distance, though I could not see it, I knew the Atlantic Ocean continued its eternal ebb and flow. The same ocean I had gazed at from Florida for decades, but which now offered me a completely new perspective. I thought about Jack's proposal, about the possibility of a fresh start at 70 years old, about the fear and excitement it brought me in equal parts, about how, after decades of living for others, I finally had the chance to make a choice based solely on what I wanted. With that thought fluttering in my mind, I fell asleep under the starry New York sky, dreaming of possibilities I had never considered real. The Montero Foundation occupied an old, renovated industrial building in the Brooklyn Navy Yard with large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Jack picked me up early Monday morning to show me what he and Caroline had created together. "We started with just 5 women and a tiny budget," he explained as we walked through the different workshops. "Now we have over 50 regular participants from 20 different nationalities." The foundation offered training in various textile techniques, from basic sewing to specialized embroidery, traditional looming, computer-aided design, and natural dyeing techniques. The women, mostly immigrants and refugees, received not only vocational training but also language classes, legal advice, and support to market their creations. "The most important thing is that they regain their dignity through work," explained Sophie, the program director, an energetic middle-aged woman who had been one of the foundation's first students years ago. "Many arrive feeling invisible, as if they have nothing to offer society. Here they discover that their hands can create beauty and value." As we toured the workshops, I watched women of all ages and backgrounds working intently on various projects. Some were sewing contemporary garments using traditional techniques from their home countries. Others were designing patterns on computers, merging the old and the new. "Last year we hosted our first fashion show," Jack commented with obvious pride. "We raised enough funds to open a new textile entrepreneurship program." In one of the rooms, a group of young women surrounded an older lady who was teaching them a complex Moroccan embroidery technique. Her hands, knotted and wrinkled like mine, moved with the precision and confidence that only comes from decades of practice. "That is Faith," Sophie explained. "She is 75 years old and is our most popular teacher. She arrived from Morocco 5 years ago to live with her son and thought her skills would no longer have value in America. Now she is one of our most treasured gems." The sight of Faith, surrounded by attentive students who valued her wisdom and experience, moved me deeply. It was a version of what I did in Florida, but amplified, systematized, with resources and reach that my small workshop could never have. At the end of the tour, Jack took me to a small meeting room where Sophie and Martin, the foundation's financial director, were waiting for us. "We have been looking for someone to run a new program," Jack explained as we sat down. "It is about recovering and documenting traditional American quilting and embroidery techniques that are in danger of disappearing." He looked at me intensely, and suddenly I understood that this was not just a casual visit. "Alexa, your experience as a traditional seamstress in Florida, combined with your teaching background, makes you the ideal candidate," he continued. "It would be a part-time position at first, with the possibility of expanding as the program develops." I was left speechless, overwhelmed by the proposal. It was not just a personal invitation to a new life. It was a real professional opportunity, an acknowledgement of my skills and knowledge. "I do not know what to say," I finally confessed. It is a wonderful opportunity, but you do not need to decide right now, Sophie interjected kindly. Take your time, think about it. The position will be available when you are ready. Back in the car, Jack respected my silence as I processed everything I had seen and the offer I had received. I do not want you to think I am trying to buy you with a job, he finally said when we were close to the hotel. The foundation genuinely needs someone with your expertise, regardless of what you decide about us. I know, I replied, appreciating his honesty, and you do an admirable job there. It reminds me of what I always dreamed of doing on a larger scale in Florida, but never had the resources or the contacts. Jack parked the car in front of the hotel, but did not turn off the engine. My flight back to Florida leaves this afternoon, I reminded him. You should pack. I know, he nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. I can treat you to lunch before you go. One last walk on the beach. Perhaps. Rockaway Beach was relatively quiet for an August Monday. We walked barefoot along the shore, letting the gentle waves caress our feet while the midday sun shined over the blue waters of the Atlantic. The same ocean I see from Florida, I commented, feeling the wet sand between my toes. But it feels different from here. Better or worse? Jack asked, intertwining his fingers with mine. Different, I repeated, as if I am looking at it from a new angle. As if I had spent decades looking at a landscape through the same window, and suddenly someone showed me a door that leads to the same place but offers another perspective. We stopped, gazing out at the horizon where the blue of the sea melted into the sky. I do not want to pressure you, Alexa, Jack finally said. I just want you to know there is a place for you here if you want it. In my life, in my home, at the foundation, but I will understand if you choose to stay in Florida. At our age, roots run deep. I looked at him, this man who had reappeared in my life as a reminder that destiny sometimes offers second chances when you least expect them. I need time, I said. I need to go back to Florida, get my affairs in order, talk to Eric face to face, but I promise you I will consider it seriously. He nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, we can call each other, visit each other, get to know each other again. No rush. I would like that, I smiled, feeling a mix of emotion and peace at the thought of a late but no less sweet courtship. At the airport, we said our goodbyes with a long hug and a kiss that was no longer tentative but a promise. I will call you when I get to Florida, I promised. I will wait for your call, he replied, his eyes shining with a mix of hope and nostalgia. The trip back to Florida felt shorter than the trip there. I was busy with the thoughts and emotions swirling inside me. I had gone to New York hoping to close a chapter of my life, and instead, I had opened a completely new one. Eric was waiting for me at the airport, his face lighting up when he saw me walk out of the terminal. He hugged me with a strength that surprised me, as if he had genuinely missed me these 3 days. "How are you, Mom?" he asked, taking my suitcase despite my protests. "You look great. New York suited you well." "I am processing," I replied honestly as we walked toward the exit. There is a lot to process, a lot to decide. In the cab ride back to my apartment, I told him about the foundation, about the job offer, about Jack's invitation to consider a life in New York. "It sounds like an incredible opportunity," Eric commented when I finished. "What are you going to do?" "I still do not know," I confessed. One part of me wants to dive into this adventure with my eyes closed. Another part is afraid. And then there is the worry about you, about leaving you alone now that you are rebuilding your life. Eric shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "Mom, I think we both know it is about time you stop basing your decisions on what I need. I have depended on you for way too long. It is time I learned to stand on my own." His words, so similar to what he had said on the phone, moved me deeply. This new Eric, more mature and self-aware, was an unexpected gift amidst all this change. When we arrived at my apartment, I was surprised to find it clean and tidy, with a fresh bouquet of carnations on the dining table. "I wanted you to have a nice welcome home," Eric explained, slightly embarrassed. The following days passed in a blur of routine and reflection. I went back to my classes at the community center, met with my Tuesday group of friends, and caught up on my pending sewing orders. But in every familiar activity, a part of my mind remained in New York, imagining what it would be like to move my life there. A week after my return, I received a call that would change everything. It was Sophie, from the Montero Foundation. "Alexa, I apologize for bothering you," she began, "but something important has come up. We have the opportunity to submit a project to recover and document traditional Florida techniques that are in danger of disappearing. The grant is significant, but we need someone with direct experience who can lead the project. I immediately thought of you." She explained the details. A 2-year project, funded by the federal government, that would involve traveling across the state of Florida, documenting traditional sewing and embroidery techniques, interviewing elderly artisans, creating a digital and physical archive, and teaching these techniques to new generations. "It is exactly what you have always dreamed of doing, from what Jack has told me," Sophie concluded. "But we need an answer soon. The deadline to submit the proposal is in 2 weeks." After hanging up, I sat in my rocking chair, contemplating the opportunity that had just presented itself. It was as if the universe were conspiring to offer me not only a new relationship, but also the professional fulfillment I had abandoned decades ago. That night, Eric came over for dinner and I told him about Sophie's call. "It is a sign, Mom," he said when I finished. "The universe is telling you it is time to move forward." "And you?" I asked, the worry still present. "Will you be okay?" Eric took my hands across the table, a gesture that reminded me of Michael. "I will be fine." "Actually," he paused, as if gathering courage, "I have been thinking about moving to Chicago." "Chicago?" The news shocked me. "Why?" "I received an offer to work in a rehabilitation program for gambling addicts," he explained, "as a support counselor. It is not a big deal. The salary is modest, but it would be a chance to use my experience to help others. And, well, Florida has too many painful memories right now. Too many temptations. Too many places associated with my addiction." I looked at him, amazed by this unexpected turn of events. "Are you sure? It is a huge change." "As sure as you are about New York," he smiled, scared but excited, ready for a fresh start. We sat in silence, taking in the idea that we were both on the verge of new chapters in our lives. "It looks like the foster family is ready to spread its wings," I finally commented, with a mix of melancholy and hope. "It is about time," Eric replied, raising his glass of water in an impromptu toast to new beginnings. The following days were a whirlwind of decisions and plans. I called Sophie to accept the opportunity to lead the project. I spoke to Jack almost every night, sharing my fears and hopes, receiving his unconditional support. "I do not expect you to move immediately," he assured me in one of our conversations. "The project will require you to spend time in both New York and Florida. We can take it one step at a time." His understanding and patience only strengthened my conviction that I was making the right decision. A month after my visit to New York, I was back at the airport terminal, this time with 2 larger suitcases and a heart full of anticipation. Eric was with me, about to leave for Chicago himself the following week. "Nervous?" he asked, as we waited for the boarding call. "Terrified," I confessed, "but also thrilled, as if I am finally allowing myself to live a life that was always waiting for me." "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Mom," he said, hugging me tightly, "and I am proud of you for having the courage to seek it." "I am proud of you too," I replied, the tears threatening to spill over, "for everything you have overcome, for the person you are becoming." We hugged one last time before I boarded the plane, both of us crying but smiling through the tears. "We will see each other soon," I promised. "New York and Chicago are not that far away." "A new family map," Eric nodded, broader, richer. The plane took off, carrying me toward my new life. As Florida disappeared in the distance, I felt a mix of nostalgia and liberation. I was not abandoning my past. I was taking it with me toward a future I had never imagined possible. Jack was waiting for me at the New York airport, with a bouquet of wildflowers and a smile that lit up his entire face. When I saw him, I felt all my remaining doubts dissipate like fog under the sun. "Welcome home, Alexa," he said as he hugged me. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I truly felt at home. 3 months later, I was standing in front of a group of women at the Montero Foundation, teaching a traditional Florida embroidery technique I had learned from my grandmother. My hands, wrinkled but nimble, guided theirs as they created patterns that had been passed down from generation to generation. In the evenings, I shared stories with Jack of my travels through small Florida towns, where I interviewed elderly artisans whose knowledge was on the verge of being lost. Together, we planned how to preserve and revitalize these traditions, how to build bridges between the past and the future. And when I visited Eric in Chicago, seeing him thrive in his new role helping other addicts, I felt that the circle was somehow complete. We had both found endings that were truly new beginnings. At 70 years old, I had discovered that life could offer second chances when you least expect them, that it is never too late to choose happiness, that sometimes the roads not taken reappear, offering us another chance to explore them, and that true strength does not lie in enduring suffering in silence, but in having the courage to seek joy even when it seems impossible, especially then.